everybody. Lance Russell and Dave Brown right along ringside. By golly, we're about ready to go with more big action.
Thank you very much, and welcome to Georgia Championship Wrestling. I'm Gordon Solie, your host, and we have quite an hour in store for us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Championship Wrestling at ringside. This is Vince McMahon, along with wrestling's only living legend, Bruno Sammartino.
Welcome to this week's edition of Mid-South Wrestling Television. I'm your host, Boyd Pierce, another outstanding card.
Hey guys, welcome back to Regional Wrestling Presents, where the past steps into the present. Also, you'll hear portions of this episode airing on the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories. I am Ray Russell, and if you guys are here on the Patreon, you're watching the video cast version, you can see this right here is Phil Adams. He is back, and that means more St. Louis Wrestling Project is upon us. Phil, welcome back. I'm excited, man.
Yeah, so am I, Ray. Thank you very much for having me back, and surprised you asked me back, but I'm happy to be here.
Oh my God, I wouldn't do this without you right now. You know, you like I said, it was over a year ago when I first announced that I had plans to go back and do the research and get everything situated for the St. Louis project. And you messaged me almost immediately, "Hey man, if you need any help, I'd be happy to be a part of this." And I said, "I don't just want your help, Phil. I would love to have you part of the project itself and have you on here as a guest. And we're happy to have you here. And lots of great feedback from the last time around."
That's great. I really appreciate being here. This has been a super fun project to work on.
Absolutely. We've had a few of the patrons and a few other listeners of the Regional Wrestling asking us when is the next episode of the St. Louis Project. Well, it is right now, guys, as we jump back into things. We ended last time around. Mr. John Contos was basically closing up shop here, at least in the St. Louis territory. Didn't seem to fare too well the last couple cards. Of course, he had that incident, a couple of no-shows, including Hulk Hogan, brother. Basically, Jim Londos was a no-show there, and we talked about that closing out the last episode. And by the end of 1923, let me pull up my notes here. Contos is done. He says, I'm not drawing, I can't do this, and off he goes into the Wild Blue Yonder. Now, it's funny because I just mentioned him recently on the Georgia History Project that I'm doing with Rick Fields. Contos opens up shop in Atlanta at some point there and has, I think, a little more success than he would here even in St. Louis, because he wasn't here too long, just a year or two here in the St. Louis territory, but he planted the seed that Tom Pax will grow, it would appear. And it kind of all ties together. Of course, Tom Pax named as the nephew, the quote-unquote Greek nephew. And even in the promoters, they're telling stories.
Right. That's it's really surprising that a promoter wouldn't be completely honest about their background.
Unbelievable, don't you think? Yeah, absolutely. So Contos packs up and he leaves town, but he leaves the territory to his nephew, Tom Pax, who takes over here in 1923, and Pax is already there. He's already working alongside Contos, and he sees these slow draws. He sees that fans aren't coming in. He sees canceled cards, but he is wide-eyed. He's guns a-blazing. He wants to, move forward, and it looks like Tom Pax has plans of his own, displayed that enthusiasm that you need for the sport. He was doing it with Contos, and now we're going to see him do it without him.
Yeah, that's right. And he was very smart about it too. He immediately after he kind of takes over, he puts out a letter to the editor or kind of a press release, basically offering to conduct a show for the American Olympic team. He was not going to take any of the receipts. He would just put on the show, but he refused to handle any of the ticketing. That he's going to leave that to somebody else. So he's like totally volunteering his services and the wrestlers' services. And so he's making a big show of that and I think he's trying to ingratiate himself with the public very early on.
All right, guys. So we're going to jump into things. Let's anybody here on the Regional Wrestling Presents side of the Patreon, we're going to take a look at some slides here as we go along and even some old-timey documents later on in the episode. So stay tuned for that if we make it that far into the story of the St. Louis Wrestling Project this time around. But there he is. Young gentleman, Tom Pax. I'm going to read a couple of lines here that I've already kind of went over, but we're going to do that again, just going along and getting everybody associated with Mr. Pax, rumored to be a relative of John Contos due to their Greek origins. Now, I couldn't find anything definitive to state they were, in fact, blood relatives, uncle, nephew, or otherwise, but Pax joins Contos on the booking front somewhere around the beginning of 1923. And while working alongside Contos, even with the recent lack of interest by the local fans, the canceling on the shows and some poor houses in general, Tom Pax powers on here. And when Contos packs up and leaves at the end of 23, he turns over the reins here to Mr. Pax. You see him on the screen as the sole promoter, and I use that term loosely because you're going to talk about that in a minute, Phil, but the sole promoter in St. Louis, which he would remain one of the top wrestling promoters, not just in St. Louis, but in the world at this point, for the next 25 years, 1923 to 1948. Basically, it was Tom Pax who laid the foundation for the St. Louis territory to be that real success.
Yeah, it's very interesting how he just immediately kind of consolidates everything. And I guess, we're talking about a time where the economy was also, it was in a very much of an upward flow.
Those roaring 20s I heard about.
Yeah, just
not so much the 2020s, but the 1920s.
The 1920s, yeah. Yeah. And he gets things consolidated before the economy kind of goes south on him. But he just comes in, and there's no real established promotion that would offer any competition at all. So the door was wide open.
So now let's move ahead a little bit here, just in the story of Tom Pax. By 1930, Pax had joined the original NWA. That's the National Wrestling Association. We've also talked about that on the Georgia Project as of late, for those of you who can't get enough of the old school storytelling. But not only did Pax run his promotion through the Great Depression, it was reportedly the only promotion to show a profit during that period of time, which is insane to think about. When you talk about the Great Depression, and anybody who's a history buff and you know the stories, and it was hard times, baby, to say the very least. And so to come out a profit and to be the only major promoter to come out a profit out of among the National Wrestling Association, the territories, the promoters there, that's saying a lot. That means, not only that's a great fan base, maybe St. Louis was doing okay financially to a better degree than some of the other states at that point in time, but you got to figure he knew what he was doing as a promoter.
Yeah, and I think I don't. There was something about St. Louis, I guess, that was wrestling had always been ascendant in St. Louis for some reason, and it just kind of held up through this horrible economic period. It really is amazing that he's able to have any kind of a profit, but it helps, I guess, when you're offering one of the only diversions from the reality of the times.
Well, last episode, you took it a little step further for me. We talked about Hard Luck Houghton and his run-in with Slicey Weissman, and we talked about Old Sullivan and some of the other promoters and things that were going on behind the scenes while Jack Curley was trying to run, and Contos and things of that nature. So this time, you outdid yourself. You went back and, well, we don't have as fun of a story as we did with Cut Your Head Off. Unfortunately, but you did go back and you found that there were some more gentlemen stepping in and attempting to run in opposition to Tom Pax earlier in the 1920s into the 1930s. And I appreciate you sending me an email of information on some of these gentlemen so I could kind of read over and do my own research as well. But I'm going to let you tell these people a little bit about some of the other promoters that stepped through into the wrestling business here in the 1920s, early 30s.
Well, even though Pax had consolidated the St. Louis wrestling scene as far as being the top promoter, everybody was looking to take a shot at him. People saw that he was making money, so if he can make money, I can make money.
That's it. That's what Tommy O'Sullivan said. Yeah,
it's so simple. I think one of the first people who saw that was a guy named Gus Tiefenthaler. He was a former wrestler back in the aughts and the teens, and he had gotten into business and was running a creamery there in St. Louis and making them pretty decent money. So he decides, what the hell, I'm an old wrestler, I can run a wrestling show. And so he runs his first card on May 7th, 1924 at a old place called Battery A, which is up in the north side of St. Louis. Okay. Obviously not there anymore. But he drew about 1,500 people. Then he's undaunted. He runs again on June 11th, 1924. And he draws a little bit less. A little less, like 1,000 or so. Then he decides on July 2nd, this is enough for me. I am out of the business. Two times.
He draws 1,500. He draws a quote unquote little less in a month later in June, and by July he's out of the game, so to speak.
Yeah, he puts out an article in the paper. Let me read a little bit from that. It's kind of interesting about what he felt he was going up against and what the kind of the state of wrestling was at the time in St. Louis. Article starts off, insurgent wrestling promoters here capitulated to the invading Greek usurpers yesterday when Gus Tiefenthaler decided that his St. Louis creamery business, after all, was softer than the mat game. Tiefenthaler, associated with other St. Louis, had noted the $10,000 and $15,000 houses attracted by wrestling shows put on under the auspices of two Greeks, Tom Pax of Chicago and Jim Londos of San Francisco, and decided that home enterprise ought to be controlling the wrestling industry. About 2 months ago, he organized a promoting company and put on two rival shows to the Pax-Londos combination. Martin Plastina was to be the big ace for the local promoters as against champion Ed Lewis for Tom Pax. Both Tiefenthaler shows lost money because the attractions brought here, with one or two exceptions, were little known to the public, which had been introduced by Pax and Londos to the names of the trust wrestlers through intensive paid publicity methods. Yesterday, after vainly trying to get Londos of the rival trust to agree to meet Plastina in the feature event of their third show, Tiefenthaler went down for the third time to stay. I'm through, he said. We can't get the right attraction, so I won't go any further with it. I tried to get Londos and Plastina together, but Plastina offered good terms and even offered to handicap Londos. But the latter positively refused to wrestle for less than $10,000 guarantee, which of course is out of the question. I do not see my way to go clear here ahead with what thus far has been a losing venture. I love wrestling. I used to be a wrestler myself, but I am stymied by the lack of material with which to work. I thought we had picked up a good man in Wild Bill Zabisco. It was represented to me that he was not in with a trust wrestlers, and I thought that with such a widely advertising man, I could get some following. I'm now convinced that they put one over on me, and that Wild Bill Zabisco, like all the rest, is lined up with the controlling forces that manipulate wrestling affairs. I know when I've had enough.
Conspiracy against Mr. Tiefenthaler.
Yeah, and so Gus is done. Oh, no, he is not.
Oh, okay.
No. It's wrestling.
Never say never, pal.
You can't get away. 4 days later, there's an article in the paper saying
4 days later
that he's reconsidering and that friends are trying to talk him back into promoting.
This cracks me up because on July 2nd, he's retired. July 6th, he's retired. Well, I'm considering, what is this, fucking Twitter? What are we doing here? Like, I made a drunk post the other night. I'm canceling that one out. I'm reconsidering. 4 days later, it took only 4 days to reconsider coming back into the wrestling business. You got to love it.
But it takes him a while to actually put on another card. He comes back on May 21st, 1925. Almost, he let it sit for about 10 months, but he has another card at an outside baseball stadium that draws 1,000 people that paid $1,145. And then he runs another time on July 8th of 1925, and he brings in the great ex-champion Wayne Munn. He thinks Wayne Munn's going to be the draw, with that, having the ex-champion moniker on him. And he drew a gate receipts of $1,338, but unfortunately Gus didn't get to keep any of that money because all the money was attached because he owed a venue a $981 debt. Wow. And so he doesn't get to keep it, and the card isn't well received by the press. Wayne Munn is very much criticized because he does zero wrestling ability. They were saying in the paper that he would knock his guy down, but then had no idea what to do when the guy was on the ground.
This were the newspapers, people reporting that it appeared he had no idea what he was doing. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, man, I've seen that, just as an adult going back in the tape trading world and seeing some of the guys that were lost in the deer in headlights, they didn't know what to do. But Wayne Munn is a former world champion, and granted, it's a work, and they gave him the belt, and they were going to use him as the very first showman world champion, and that didn't work out too well. We talked about that on the last episode.
Right.
But even still, the fact that the newspaper people are reporting it, I kind of want to go back and see what Wayne Munn looked like in the ring now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it must have been really terrible, especially in that era. I guess the fact that it must have looked weird to people that he would knock people down and then not try to wrestle them, not try to wrestle
grab
them
a hold.
Ground.
Yeah, grab a hold.
And,
yeah.
Yeah, it just everybody knew he just didn't have any ability, and I think Also, press in St. Louis may have been a little bit under the sway of Tom Pax, because I didn't read about any card that got any positive reviews. There was a lot of cards that got no like reviews as far as, this was good, this was bad. But there was a lot of cards that got, wrestling isn't as good as what Tom Pax puts on.
How much of that do you think, just based on all your research and things, how much of that do you think is Tom Pax is maybe in the pocket a little bit of these guys as well, a little favoritism? Or
oh yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that Tom Pax knew how to play the media game. Back in that era, there was a lot of shady dealing, so to speak, a lot of under the table sort of payoffs to gifts to sports reporters, and Tom Pax is, like we said here, he's having gates of $10,000 and $15,000. He's making some money doing this wrestling, and he's distributing that money to the people who are going to continue to give him publicity. There's no doubt that he was doing that.
Right. And I've covered that multiple times in various territories. It was a thing, a very big thing back in this era specifically. And it's promoting. I mean, that's just part of promoting. It's not just putting up a local ad, or a poster or things like that. There's a lot more to it, and getting your name in the paper. We'll talk a lot more about that, I feel like, even when we get to Sam Muchnick. But just getting your name, because Muchnick was, he was a writer, and so we'll get to that absolutely as time progresses here. But
and just to go back to that, promoting in the 20s and 30s before mass media of television and even radio to a certain extent, promoting was built on relationships and having relationships with important people, not just press, but government. We saw how poor Hard Luck Hutton would get shut down when a different police commissioner would come into play. So you had to be building relationships with everybody all the time. Like it's almost like being a businessman in today's world, where you have to contribute to both political parties to make sure that you're covered. And
I was going to say, it's politics, especially running locally like this, back in the territory era.
Absolutely. Everything was very, very localized, and you had to have your name out there, and people had to know who you were. You had to be a part of the community, basically.
Boy, it must have really paid, literally and figuratively, to be high up in the politic world back in this era specifically, and the things you could get away with,
Oh, my. Well, the good old days, right?
Well, we got a couple more guys on this list here, so I'm going to let you continue to tell the story of some of these other guys who decided to step in and try to run against Tom Pax over this time period here.
Yeah, I'd read an article. It was from, I guess, 1933 or 1934, that was talking about a new promotion that was going to come into town, which never ran, as it turned out. But they said that at that point, 34 rival promotions had tried to take on Tom Pax. Now, I couldn't find very many of those. A lot of those were one and done, and I think a lot of those were guys who were running small shows in the city who weren't competing. Like our old friend Tommy Sullivan had come back in the 30s and was running shows for 40 and 50 people, but it wasn't meant as a competition. It was more meant as kind of like a local territory, so to speak, giving guys experience and trying to make 20 or $30. As we get past the Depression, the worst parts of the Depression, the late 20s and very early 1930s, competition starts to come back. And first couple of people who show up are a couple of local guys. One guy is named Curly Fishman. Curly is described in the newspaper. His occupation at the time was, quote unquote, local bookmaker, which I guess is a hell of a job.
That is a hell of a job.
And his partner was Benny Rubens. Benny Rubens was a former middleweight boxer from the St. Louis area.
That was Paul Rubens. Sorry about that.
Different, totally different. No theater involvement at all. that we know of.
That we know.
But these guys were basically frontmen for the Billy Sandow Trust, and they were kind of put up to promote using the Sandow Bowser wrestlers. They would deny that they were involved at all with Billy Sandow, because Billy Sandow had a bad name in St. Louis for, I think a lot of it stemmed back from the, Wayne Munn and Ed Lewis exchange. And so Billy got a kind of a bad name as a manipulator. And anyway, Curly and Benny ran their show on February 13th of 1931 at the Arena in St. Louis. The Arena was the big venue. It stood until around 1992 or 93 or so. And it held 20,000 people even back in 1931.
Wow, that's huge for them.
Yeah. When I moved to St. Louis in 1980, I don't think there had been a single renovation made to it by that point. It was a fun old place. But anyway, they drew 3,200 people for their first show, and that for a gate of $5,500, which isn't bad, I guess. It was headlined by John Piesick versus Al Baffert. And press gave it a horrible review, said that Piesick did nothing but carry the man for 13 minutes. It was just bad. The wrestling was bad. Curly said that the card broke even, so obviously that means they lost money. Mm-hmm. And a few days later in the paper, he's quoted as saying, they're probably never going to run again unless they get some bigger names to draw into St. Louis.
I will say this.
It turned out that was their last show. They never got the bigger names.
One and done, apparently, here for Mr. Curly Fishman and Vinnie Rubens. But yeah. I saw the gate here, 3,200 fans. They draw 3,200. That's not shabby for your first show, though. I mean, like, guys, promoters today would die for 3,200 fans, just coming in and running against another promotion like that. So I consider that maybe not a financial success for whatever they were paying out, whatever they owed. But to me, in that era, that looks like a financial success to me as well. But obviously, there were things that played in there where they decided, we're not doing this again. Yeah,
like I said, he was quoted in the paper said that we didn't make anything, we didn't lose anything. So I mean, to me, that means they lost. If they hadn't have lost money, they would have done it again. Yeah, so
no doubt about that.
I'm guessing even with making $5,500 that they weren't going to. It wasn't going to be sustainable for them.
My thought process on all of this is they draw 3,200. Meanwhile, let's be clear. Tom Pax is running this entire time. So if they're drawing 3,200, let's look at some of the figures. I'll have to dive and find some of the figures around the same time that Tom Pax was doing. But my point is that St. Louis is booming right now in the pro wrestling world. When you're just an upstart promotion, you can pack in over 3,000 fans. There are fans clamoring for pro wrestling. So this is really a boom period.
Yeah, and we'll see with the next person who comes in for a show just 3 months later how well he does. And that person's name is Colonel John S. Berger, Berger. Don't know what he was a colonel from. Not sure even if he had served.
Was a colonel, right?
But he was from Boston, and he was. He said that he was in charge of an exhibit that the city of Boston was doing for the World's Fair.
Boston.
That they had asked him to do this exhibit, but had asked him to hold off for a year in completing the project. So he had a year to kill, so he decided he was going to come to St. Louis and promote wrestling. At least that was his story. He was fronting for Paul Bowser in Boston, part of the Sandow Bowser. It was described in the paper as the Sandow Bowser colony.
You can't fool the St. Louis paper, man. I'm telling you, they're breaking kayfabe everywhere.
Yeah, they are. It started much earlier, and even when Tom Pax shows up, Jack Curley in 1924 is in the St. Louis paper criticizing Pax for being part of a trust and not being able to get his wrestlers into St. Louis. But anyway, and John Berger comes in, runs his first show on May 26, 1931 at the Arena. Again, 20,000 seat venue. But he draws 5,734 people, which is pretty decent. He gets a gate of $5,242, a little bit less than $1 a person. The paper criticized the bouts as being very slow-moving as compared to the action that Tom Pax's colony provides.
Colony. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's what they're called. Berger is complaining in the paper after that he wants to run more dates, but by this time Pax is smart. He has secured the lease for both the Arena and the Coliseum. Those are the two major places in St. Louis. The Arena holds 20,000. The Coliseum holds 9, and he has a lease on both buildings. So Berger is fighting this. He gets a meeting of the Missouri Athletic Commission together on December 4th, 1931, to complain about this situation. how can we allow this? One wrestler promoter is controlling all the venues. I can't get in to run a show. The commission supposedly sympathizes with Berger's plight, but feels it doesn't have the power to order Tom Pax to sublet basically to Berger. Eventually, though, Berger, I guess through his publicity and through maybe throwing some money at the situation, is able to work out a deal with Tom Pax. And I'm guessing Paxson knew that he was in a superior position anyway. He works out a deal with Pax to lease the Coliseum from Pax for a series of 6 shows. Like I said, the Coliseum holds 9,000 people. It wasn't
right.
John Berger, and his first show was on January 29th, 1932, after he had worked out his deal with Pax. And he gets 1,788 people paying $1,632 for a show that's headlined by Ed Don George. Comes back on February 12th, 1932. He draws a little bit less, 1,194 people, makes a lot less, $835, with Joe Malkowitz headlining.
And Malkowitz is going to become a promoter himself over there on the West Coast.
Yeah. And comes back on February 26th, runs again, draws a big crowd for him, 1,821 people paying $1,359. March 11th comes back, running regularly now, 1,354 people pay $955. On April 5th, 1932, he has his biggest show, gets 2,104 people paying $2,108. Somebody paid, 4 people had to pay $2, I guess, for Henry DeGlon versus Joe Malkowitz. And then on May 4th, 1932, he runs his last card. 1,131 unhappy fans pay $863. The main event was supposed to be, it's this man again, Waldleg Zbyszko versus John Pisak. But Pisak no shows. And no announcement was made to the customers before the show or during the show. The commissioner, by this point, St. Louis had its own wrestling commission. And the commissioner of the show didn't know that there was going to be this big no-show of the main eventer until he walks into the Coliseum that night. Pisak was replaced by a Indian wrestler named Hai Gandar. Gandar had told everybody that he had been notified a day earlier that he was going to be needed. So there was time to let people know that the main eventer would not be showing up. But anyway, the people were very, very pissed off about this substitution of a no-name wrestler for one of the bigger names at the time, in John Pisak. And that was the last time we hear of John Berger running a show in St. Louis.
Well, that's unfortunate. I was looking at the dates and the how many people are coming into the house, how much money they're making. You go back to January 29th, a little over 1,700. They make 1,600. You go fast forward about a month later, February 26th, they bring in an extra few people, but they make $300 less. It makes me feel like maybe he cut the cost just a little bit to bring people in, and maybe hoping that would bring them back once they word of mouth. People are coming in, they can afford the tickets, and now they're coming in. Oh, this ain't too bad. I'll come back next show. And unfortunately, like you said, they do the old card subject to change deal, where unfortunately you can't get away with that when you're doing it, and not telling the fans, even though you know in advance that you're not putting this match out there because you want the house. And so apparently it looks like Mr. Berger finds out pretty fast you're not going to get away with that here in St. Louis. No, and it seems to me that he reached a plateau. He's not drawing more than 2,000 people. Right. Yeah.
And he gave it a pretty good run, but I think he realized that that's going to be their kind of what their cap is, and it's probably going to go down after he puts on a bad show with a no show. And I think he just basically cuts and runs, goes back to Boston, and the Bowser Sandow group will wait for a later time, I guess, to try to make their next move. It's amazing. They keep sending people in. They're sending the troops in to kind of promote for them third-party style in another territory like this, trying to compete. So people give Vince that crap, about trying to take over. But these guys, there's no honor among thieves, right? So no, they were the same, probably in many ways, just as bad, if not worse. Yeah, I'm sure there were some bad things going on behind the scenes as well that we'll never know about, but I think me and Steve Crawford just covered it recently in the ICW show that should be dropping the final days of the ICW,
where money lies, honor dies, especially in the promoting game. And it's a fun story. You guys stay tuned for that one. But man, here we go. We're going to jump back into things. So while all of this is going on, let's not forget Tom Pax is also running the show around here. So Pax,
he doesn't stop. I mean, he's running at the arena and getting much larger crowds and making much more money.
Well, it's hard to compete with a guy when he's subletting to you to even compete against the guy. That's the funniest part of the entire story here.
Yeah, it almost makes me think that Pax knew that he was going to give this guy just enough rope to hang himself.
Well, Pax was a smart businessman.
Yeah, and I figure he probably doesn't want to get the reputation of not allowing any kind of competition, so he figures, I'll let this guy compete, but I know I'm going to crush him. So
right, and he's going to pay me to do it, right? Like I'm going to sublet it, so he's going to give me a few bucks.
right, yeah,
it's not going to hurt anything.
So he's making money off of both shows.
Well, you talked about the Great Depression, and Tom Pax was a wise man because he survived this entire era by wisely selling the world title to other territories. And by promoting in his hometown, Pax would, for a fee, send his champion to drop the title to a challenger in another territory. And since Tom Pax still retained control of the belt, if he had to, he could just strip the title from said challenger if they didn't want to drop it back. So he had a stronghold on the gold, selling the title, the world title, that we'd see that later on also, especially in Japan. Baba saying, hey, I give you a few bucks, Jack Briscoe, you drop the belt to me. Harley did it without even negotiating with Sam and crew, right? So Harley was just doing it on his own. Even the story goes, I covered this with Jamie Ward, Tommy Rich getting the belt, Jim Barnett making some money work there, while Jim Crockett, who was the president at the time, was in Japan. And Crockett gets wind of this. He jumps on a plane, heads back to the States, and by the time he gets back, Harley's already the champion again. So, I mean, we would see that happen later as well, but I just think it's fantastic that this guy walks into the wrestling world underneath John Contos, just kind of co-promoting or whatever, you just doing the gopher kind of stuff, and then he becomes the promoter by de facto, and now he's out here controlling the world title, his world title anyway, and he's paying these guys, they're getting paid to go out and drop the belt to make it prestigious in these other territories around town, and if they don't want to listen, well, that's okay, I own the belt, I'll just take it back.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at the origin of what have become tried and true promotional techniques, because that's, like you said, that's something that was done as long as there was an NWA title, and he was the first guy. Even he was basically the first guy. It looks like that is smart enough to make this happen.
It is. I mean, he does a lot of things first. He was first in many ways. He was first in St. Louis in a successful promotion. I mean, a quarter of a century is not a bad little cup of coffee in the world of pro wrestling as a promoter. So as successful as St. Louis had become, Pax knew he needed to stay with the times, using the current big stars of that time. And by the 1930s, the biggest star of all, that Golden Greek, Jim Londos. Now, Londos, his manager, was a man by the name of Ed White, who was also a co-promoter up in Chicago at the time. Now, Ed White knew the value of Jim Londos, and thus the price was high, guys, especially to the larger cities like a New York, which subsequently led to a falling out between Ed White and Jim Londos, working with the New York guys of Toots Munt and, once upon a time here, Jack Curley, who is now working up in New York City rather than St. Louis, as we mentioned on the last episode. So with the ongoing issues in the Northeast contingent, Tom Pax wisely forms his own alliance with Ed White, who was booking out his Golden Goose, or Golden Greek, sorry guys, Jim Londos, and thus a promotional war began between the boys of the Northeast and the Midwest. So you were just talking about Boston trying to come in. Now we've got the New York City boys unhappy also with Tom Pax, and I think it all comes back down to money, obviously. We're going to see off and on guys align and disalign, if that's a word, or whatever, and then realign and all these things. And we talked about this in the Georgia Project as well. They're joining the NWA. They're leaving the NWA. So it's funny to see how quickly ideas and thoughts and relationships change based on how long and how often we can get along.
Yeah, but it was the key to the whole thing for Pax was having Jim Londos on his side.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. That is it.
I'm guessing without having that on his side or having Jim on his side, his whole business operation may not have had the success that it ended up having.
No, 100%. I agree with you. I often wonder sometimes, you remember when Crockett was losing his ass and he sells to Turner. If he doesn't sell to Turner, what becomes of the NWA? Meanwhile, Vince McMahon had the golden goose that was Hulk Hogan. And by that point, he had a machine underneath him as well. But it was Hulk Hogan that really aided in that machine getting going, really going. And so I have to wonder, like you said, without Jim Londos working with the Tom Pax colony, if you will, it'd be interesting to see how he would compete with the big boys up in New York, though. Those are some big time names too, promoting wise. And even Bowser coming in there too. So, those guys all get together up there. They could really done some damage. So it was really wise for Pax to get in with Ed White here.
Yeah, it's very smart. The way he always has the top draw, no matter what. Even if he's denied challengers, he has the top draw. He can always make his own challengers.
Well, needless to say, with Londos and other current top talent in their pocket, that's current, guys, modern day talent. Pax and Ed White flourished while Munt and company were suffering without the young stud Londos on their cards. The Northeast promoters were forced to use the old guard past their primes like Ed Strangler Lewis. So Pax played his hand and he won the pot, I guess you could say, as Jack Curley was eventually forced to come to a new agreement with Tom Pax and company. Imagine that. Forming I love this word in the terms of pro wrestling, forming a trust of sorts, a business agreement arrangement between promotions and areas, later to be known as the territories. So by the time of Jack Curley's death in 1937, Tom Pax had already emerged arguably as the industry's most powerful promoter. Wow.
Amazing where we've come from.
This is not a guy who had a back history in wrestling promoting. This is a guy who kind of just wandered into it. And he probably learned a few things from John Contos along the way and some of the other boys. But clearly he had some conversations and could step back and look at what he was working with. And he formed the correct alliances, obviously. He was on the right side of that. He didn't get hard-nosed with Ed White. I don't know if he was kissing his butt, but he certainly worked out a great financial agreement. And thus, Toots Munt and company, like I was just kind of alluding to a little bit ago, when they need you, they need you. And it's like, well, if you can't beat them, join them kind of deal. And I don't know how long the trust, I love that word here, is going to last, but it's going on at this point in time. So they said, all right, you got them. You got the golden goose. So we're gonna align with you for now. And thus, I don't want to say the territories are born, but we do see some form of a loose territory system here.
Yeah, it's a kind of an amalgamation of sorts, and I'm guessing that this trust was not built on trust.
No,
not mutual trust, at least.
No,
but yeah, it is the beginning of kind of a circuit, maybe a better word for, as opposed to a territory, because there's a lot of different cities involved, but they were all together and they all used the same wrestlers, and for a while at least they were very, very cooperative.
Well, we've seen it work time and time again since this point in time. It's the young guys coming in and promoting that want to move with the times. The old guys, the old timers, wanting to stay in their tried and true ways. And so obviously Munt and crew realized, no, we got to move on with the times too if we want to keep things going here. The old guard of talent in the ring just isn't cutting it alone. We need the young, good-looking babyface Jim Londos and all that young crew that can move around and really bring in the fans. So over the years, Pax subsequently helped groom a number of other sports, the top wrestlers, including Wild Bill Longson, Abe Coleman, Orville Brown, NWA champion, Fred Blassie even. However, it was also Pax who was responsible for nurturing maybe the greatest champion ever when he recruited a young grappler by the name of Lou Thesz to his territory back in 1936. The top student of renowned hooker George Tragos was Thesz. He was only 20 years old when he first arrived in St. Louis, yet Pax immediately recognized the superstar potential, and he subsequently protected his investment by keeping Lou away from the region's most dangerous so clever here. Pax keeping Lou Thesz away from the dangerous opponents while he honed his in-ring skills. Very wise to protect what you're looking at as your future.
Yeah, it's a promotional technique that was tried and true in boxing. You give the guy who you feel is going to be a future star, give him 20 easy fights, get that record built up to where people think, oh my God, this guy's 20-0 with 20 knockouts. Yeah. He's unbeatable. It works in boxing. It's going to work in wrestling.
And Lou, being protected here as well from the other hookers who may become jealous of Lou, may go after Lou, may not help him develop, so to speak, as a professional wrestler and learn his craft.
I don't think there was any jealousy in wrestling in those days. I think everybody was trying to work together for the common good, just like today.
The money. Yeah, sure.
No, I'm being facetious, obviously. If they see this guy who's going to come and take their spot. Well, broken arm might slow him down a little bit.
That's right. Yeah, they're certainly going to persuade Lou into maybe picking another career. Boy, would they find out if they had messed with Lou Thesz. I don't know how far along he was in 1936, but I'm sure he would have attempted to hold his own.
I think Lou came into the game as a pretty he would have been a dangerous man, so to speak. Yeah. I don't think he was just a lump of clay that had yet to be molded. He knew some stuff.
He knew some things, as they say. But no, it's just fun to see that they value him. Lou hasn't even become anything in the business yet, and they're going, this guy. Not Wayne Munn, like Ed Lewis saw, but this guy here, he's going to be something one day. And prophecy, will come to be with as a result, though, here, Thesz eventually will become the youngest, at this time, world heavyweight champion in history when he defeats Everett Marshall December 29th, 1937. And for the next quarter century, Thesz would reign as the industry's undeniable premier grappler. But it all starts, I don't want to say it starts, but it really gets going here when he's being protected. He's being sought out. He's being groomed to become, it's not just you're walking in, Hulkamania's born. Let me take him from Vern, pal. I see something in this kid. He's going to be something. Let's get him going. It's like you said with the boxing deal. Let's build him up so that we can push him, groom him to be a future world champion. And that they do. And unlike Wayne Munn, Thesz can hold his own in there. So nobody's stealing the title from Lou. No screw jobs here on Lou Thesz. And if you do screw Lou, I feel bad. You better get out of that ring pretty fast.
Yeah, you're gonna get one of those sneaky little back elbows that you love to do against the ropes.
Pop the elbow there.
Yeah, I swear that should be used today. It's such a cool little move.
Relive the glory days of Memphis wrestling with the Retro Wrestling Review USWA podcast. Each week, we go back in time to review USWA Championship Wrestling from the 1990s, episode by episode. Join us for watch-alongs, behind-the-scenes stories, and exclusive interviews with people who were there and lived it. Whether you grew up watching it or you're discovering it for the first time, this podcast is your ringside seat to Memphis wrestling history. It's all a part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Listen now at USWApodcast.com.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here. Lots of new stuff happening here at WrestleCopia, and I want to update you on everything going on with the brand right now. First and simple, if you haven't checked out our website at WrestleCopia.com, it's a great way to keep up with the latest episodes of all of your favorite Copia programming, from the Wrestling Memory Grenade to Regional Rasslin with the Territory Talk, the Wrestling Stoop with the legendary Bob Roop, Professor Dan Ginnity and the Pro Wrestling Academy, and all the other great podcasts from Gene Jackson, Bob Smith, Dave Dynasty, and the boys from the Other Ship. And of course, all of those programs also available at your favorite podcast streaming platforms. And if you want to stay up to date with everything going on in the Copia world, all the latest news, random thoughts, fun videos, pictures, and more, make sure to join the more than 33,000 followers over at Facebook.com/WrestlingGrenade. Don't be left out. Please also follow us at the former Twitter, now X, at Wrestling Grenade, and subscribe to YouTube.com/WrestlingGrenade. Would also greatly appreciate you leaving us a 5-star review at your favorite podcast apps, guys, because every positive review makes our podcasts more visible in the algorithms, if you will, which allows us to continue to grow. Now, for those who have been asking about merchandise, WrestleCopia merch, you can find plenty of designs for our t-shirts, hats, magnets, stickers, coffee mugs, and more over at the TeePublic store. That is tpublic.com/user/WrestleCopia. And last but definitely not least, it's what keeps the entire machine going. I'm talking about patreon.com/WrestleCopia. Now with 3 major tiers and tons of Patreon exclusive next level content for our supporters. Remember, guys, no subscription, cancel any time, but I think you'll like the content that we're offering there for any budget you may have. And you can sign up right now, patreon.com/WrestleCopia. We appreciate your support in helping us pay the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network running and enabling us to continue to bring you all the quality programming that we offer.
Hey, it's Bob Smith, and guess what? The Outdated Wrestling Hour is now part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. But hey, no fear, you're still going to hear the unique guests, comedy, music, authors, journalists, funny people. Who knows who's going to end up on the Outdated Wrestling Hour? Remember, it's all new and all old. So check it out in the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and wherever you get your podcasts. Listen if you know what's good for you.
I think they learned a lesson with Wayne Munn that they weren't going to put the title on just somebody who couldn't handle himself at all, and so they learned from a mistake.
Well, in future interviews, Thesz has stated that not many of the wrestlers of his time or any time really were given this type of break that he had, and that's true. And he did not understand why me, guys. I think that the answer to this was easy. Tom Pax wanted to protect his investment the same way he protected his investment in Orville Brown. The story on Orville was that he came to St. Louis so that Tom Pax could take a look at him. Pax suggested that, he go east and work with some of the top wrestlers around the other territories, the other promotions. And Orville Brown said that he didn't have any money to train. I don't have any way to get there. I don't have any way to keep my body up. I don't have any way to keep training to be a pro wrestler, a top caliber wrestler anyway. And so the story goes, Tom Pax wrote Orville Brown a check for $5,000. And this was in 1933. So that's over 120 grand today. Think about that. I mean, he just said, you're going to make this money back for me. No problem. Here's a $5,000 check. Now that's the story from a few sides, including people that weren't necessarily, they didn't have a dog in the fight. So Orville Brown stared at the check. He told this story at some point, I guess to Thesz and Thesz related or something, but he said he got the check and he was in disbelief. And Tom Pax replied, "You'll pay it back. And someday you will make me a lot of money when you are wrestling the main event here in St. Louis." So Tom Pax was kind of a visionary, right? He finds Orville Brown if it wasn't for the car accident, and finds Lou Thesz, and he's Nostradamus as far as predicting future world stars. I mean, you can only push a guy so far if they don't have the talent to take the ball and go with it. But just think about that. That's 120 grand in today's world. And he's just cutting him a check based on the future. Oh, you'll pay it back. And then some.
Yeah, it's amazingly prescient. He kind of has like this a little bit of a Jim Barnett in him, in that he can spot people, spot raw people, and see, this guy's going to be a star. I can make money from him. And in wrestling, that is an incredible gift to have.
100%.
Because that's the only thing that's going to allow you to keep evolving. And if you don't keep evolving in wrestling, you get eventually just stamped out.
Well, Strangler Lewis tried, and he failed pretty quickly there in his Wayne Munn experiment. So not everybody has that gift, absolutely. And it's a great comparison there to Barnett, who's the last guy he picked was John Cena, right? They say. So he was doing it all the way to the end of time, picking out the next big star. This is it's a fun story, though, to see this guy. I just can't get over the fact that, prior to 1922, 23, this guy probably didn't know a whole thing in the world about pro wrestling. And here he is by the 1930s, just developing the future, literally the future of professional wrestling.
Do we know if there were misses, like guys that he gave $5,000 to that we never heard of again? Well,
if there were, I'm sure those stories don't come out as often as the successes, right? That's a good question. Yeah. I'm sure there's some historians out there. Great question. If anybody out there listening, if you guys know anybody who might know, or if you know yourself, please write in, let us know. And we'll be happy to discuss it here on future episodes, because that would be a great question. I'm sitting here putting this guy over like he's the world, and I can't really argue that he's not. I mean, 25 years in the territory, all these successes and things. But yes, throughout anybody's career, there's going to be misses as well as hits. So I'd be curious myself. I mean, that's a lot of money to just write a check for. It's like, it's a huge gamble is what it is.
Yeah, I'm wondering if he had any any giant Gonzaleses in his wake.
Got to get the gimmicks in. Yes,
people who just didn't make it, no matter how much money.
Giant Gonzalez feels like more of a Pfeffer gimmick, but that would have been fun.
But but a similar sort of deal of somebody who you just throw up money at, but just can't make it.
Tom Pax is running the show, man. He's running the show.
He is amazing in that he keeps it going for so long.
Yeah.
In a period where, he is, like I said, even though there's a lot of one and done guys, he is being bombarded by people coming in and seeing, well, this guy is making money in the Depression and after the Depression. Even in the 1930s, the economy was still shit in the United States.
Right.
It took a while. It basically took World War II to get the economy back humming again. But anyway, people were seeing him making money and figured, well, this is easy. But it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy at all.
No, and the power struggled to come. When I'm looking at the notes coming up here in 1932, Tom Pax would also hire a young sports writer named, wait for it, Sam Muchnick to serve as his main publicist. Sam Muchnick had previously worked for the St. Louis Times, where he had met Tom Pax while covering the area's wrestling events. But after the Times merged with the St. Louis Star, Muchnick rejected a management position when one of his close friends was bumped from the staff. Loyal friend. Sam was a loyal man, loyal in many ways. Muchnick instead agreed to join Tom Pax's promotion, handling the company's finances and public relations. So the relationship with Sam Muchnick is born. It sounded like they knew each other, obviously, from Sam writing in the paper and attending some of the shows and things of that nature. But it sounds like Sam turned down a gig. This story, maybe it was more to do with the finances. I don't really know. But supposedly one of his friends was fired from the paper for no good reason. Sam didn't like that. He liked the offer from Pax instead. I think money talked also here, probably Tom Pax, but he's bringing Sam in. Sam is now part of the pro wrestling business in some way, shape, or form anyway.
Yeah, and it's smart because Sam, as a newspaper man, has relationships. So Pax is not only does Tom Pax have a relationship with Sam Muchnick, now Tom Pax has a relationship with everybody that Sam has a relationship with.
Right.
And it's just building and building and building.
So Sam comes in 1932, and for the next 9 years, Muchnick will serve alongside Pax as his right-hand man and chief apprentice. However, their relationship took a sour turn after Pax promoted a heavyweight boxing bout between Joe Louis and Tony Musto on April 8th, 1941. The fight was huge, a big success, as Tom Pax collected $67,000 in revenue while earning only $14,000 in profits. Now, according to BoxRec.com, I got some numbers there. There was a crowd of 17,472 fans out there for the Lewis fight. The gross gate was nearly $53,000. So over 17,000 fans, gross gate of nearly $53,000. I did the math. That's $1.2 million today is what they would have brought in there for the Joe Louis fight. That's a lot of money to bring in. Now, supposedly, Pax revenue, he only earned about $14,000 in profits out of all of that, which is still a great chunk of change when you do the math. We talked about $5,000 equating hundreds. It's about $350,000. I mean, right? Or 300? Yeah, it would be about $330-some thousand, I think, or so. Is what Tom Pax would have got out of all of this. Either way, though, Sam Muchnick took exception when Pax issued him a paltry $200 bonus, which is still $4,500 today, but a $200 bonus for the event. Now, during the interview with Scott Teal many years later, Sam Muchnick talked about this, and he said, and I quote, "For all the work I did, Pax gave me a $200 bonus. I wasn't happy about it and might have let things go until I learned some things a few weeks later. I was talking with boxing promoter Mike Jacobs' right-hand man, Harry Markson, about something else, and he said that Mike had wanted to give me 10% of the profits, $1,400, $31,000 today. So he was supposed to get $1,400, but he only winds out getting $200. And apparently the story goes that Tom Pax was the one that told Mike that $200 was enough. Don't spoil him. Don't spoil the boy. When I heard that, I decided I'll be leaving him. Londos helped talk me into leaving him because Londos was also on the outs with Pax at the time. I decided to go out on my own, and Pax tried to stop me, but I got an injunction against the athletic commission. These seeds are planted. My goodness, once again, drawing a shit ton of money, supposedly. Now, this is hearsay, but the boxing promoter wanted to give Sam $1,400, and Tom Pack says, don't spoil the boy. We'll just give him $2. He'll be happy with that.
Yeah, you wonder if somebody was trying to sow seeds of dissension there too.
You think?
You never know. Hey, Sam, you're getting screwed. You might want to go out on your own. Hey, Sam,
well,
you never know if somebody's trying to sow some seeds in there to mess with Pax's organization.
Phil, I don't know about you.
It's very interesting.
I'm a grown-ass man, and so when I want an answer to something, I'm going to go ask somebody directly. I know that's not the route a lot of people take, and clearly not the route in professional wrestling, because those stories are going to continue on from every war we see to everything in between. Probably could have been settled had guys just sat down and had a conversation or two, like grown-ass adults, but we don't get that a lot, and we don't even get that in today's world very much, not just politically, but just in everyday life. I see a lot of people that say, I heard you say that. Why didn't you just ask me if I said that? Mm-hmm. The worst I can do is lie, which I wouldn't do. But I mean, that at least you confronted me at that point. You know what I mean? And so
maybe the thought in wrestling is that, well, I'm going to get lied to anyway, so why bother?
Yeah. And again,
but you're right. That's obviously like 99% of all the problems that we have could have been taken care of without just with a nice conversation.
My logic and thought is the worst you can do is lie to me when I call you out, but at least I know I called you out. So at that point, I have you in a lie. You know what I mean?
It's on you now.
So Sam wasn't happy with the $200 in his story. He wasn't happy with it to begin with, but it was like, what are you going to do? And then he finds out, well, I was going to make 7 times that if it wasn't for a dear old promoter here. So it seems like Sam was growing tired and had learned a lot in 9 years, I'm sure, just working alongside one of the lead promoters in all of the world of pro wrestling. So Sam had learned a thing or two, I'm sure, along the way. Very wise man was Sam Muchnick. So in May of 1942, Muchnick, with a court injunction, ran events in opposition to Tom Pax right there in St. Louis. So Sam becomes a promoter, running his first show 17 years before he would get TV. So Sam Muchnick already running shows way back in 1942. Now, nevertheless, Pax used his vast industry connections, if you will, to prevent Muchnick from securing any of these sports' big names. And with Tom Pax controlling all the premier superstars of the time, as a result, it was Pax who continued to maintain his dominance over the upstart Sam Muchnick promotion in the box office throughout much of the next few years. So Sam, we're going to talk about Sam entering the Air Force here in a little bit. So Sam's going to go away for a while. He wasn't getting much success anyway here because Tom Pax had control of the business, really. He had the talent. He had the ins politically. He had the main eventers. He had pretty much everything in his favor. And Sam Muchnick, it only took this one little story of you got ripped off, a good $1,200 that you had coming to you. And that's all it took for Sam Muchnick to run opposition. And even though it's going to take a while to get there, it begins.
Yeah, I think Sam had to sue the Athletic Commission because I think he had applied for a license on 3 or 4 different occasions and been denied very speciously each time because, of course, Pax was controlling the commission. And that's why Sam had to go the judicial route even to have the opportunity to promote.
Well, in the meantime, Muchnick enlisted in the U.S. Air Force for 2 years, but after reaching the rank of sergeant, congratulations, Sam finished his service in 1945, thereabouts. So Sam was there in World War II. It's not, if I'm doing my math correctly, it seems like.
That's pretty much the heart of it.
Yeah, he started right back where he left off here as a wrestling promoter. That was such a weird time. I mean, you think, and I know it happened to many a human being, but you leave for the war and you go out there, and World War II is, a very serious deal. And you come back and you just got to try to pick up where you left off. Some people were able to, some people weren't. But it's amazing. One day you're up there in a plane shooting down, the opponents, if you will, to be PC here. And then you're back here on U.S. ground, and now you're competing in wrestling promoting.
Today, in today's world, people would have had to have years and years of therapy, but people just, in 1940, people just walked right back into it.
Threw you right back into it.
Yep. It's amazing. At the time, people were actually, starving for some entertainment of some sort that wasn't war related.
Right, absolutely. So, and they were getting it here through Tom Pax now. So Sam didn't have much success. That probably played a little bit into it as well. I'm sure if he was booming, he wouldn't have just took off and went. Maybe he would have. I don't know. Taking care of the country. He
might not have had much of a choice.
That's true too. That's a good call. But so Sam is back on U.S. soil. He is back in the wrestling game. He's done his tour, a couple years over there. And now he's back here running against Tom Pax. But remember, Tom Pax has been running this entire time. So while Sam was away, Tom continued to play. He was the promoter. He was the man. So he continues to promote during World War II. And though it's speculated the box office likely dropped during this time period, I don't think the numbers would be near as low as that of the Great Depression. But I would still think the box office would still have to take a hit during this era of the United States.
Yeah, it's definitely taking a hit. Not only have you lost some of your population to go off to serve, but also a lot of the wrestlers are serving, so you don't have the same crew that you had. I think back in this time during the war, I think Wild Bill Longson was kind of ruling the roost here in St. Louis a lot of times. Well,
Tom Pax is looking to close up shop maybe here in the 1940s. Eventually, for financial reasons, reportedly, a $350,000 in 1940s money, mind you. That's a big reason, to be exact. That's $4.7 million today. Tom Pax had lost his money in the stock market. Ooh, was it just the stock market? I don't know. But he was forced to sell Tom Pax Sports Enterprises, Inc. to the Mississippi Valley Sports Club in 1948. So it wasn't wrestling that killed Tom Pax. It was the stock market. I can't prove where the money went, but apparently Tom lost all his revenue there.
It sounds very difficult to believe that a businessman of Tom's acumen would have invested everything in a way that he would have been on the hook to lose it all. It's especially in the stock market.
I was going to say, are the ponies on the stock market? I'm not really sure what was going on.
I'm guessing there's something else going on that's causing him to lose all this money.
What's causing all this? Nearly $5 million in today's money. That's insane.
Normal investments during that period of time, and we didn't have a stock market crash in the 40s. That had already taken place. So if you had told me he lost all his money in 1929, I said, no, that makes sense. Stock market now, I think there must have been something else going on.
It's unfortunate that he's getting out of business just before the TV era, too. Pax would continue to stay involved in event promotions as he ran the Thrill Circus throughout the 1950s before passing away in October of 1964. So he gives up pro wrestling, but he stays in the entertainment business, pal. The Thrill Circus. Would have liked to have been there for that one. Though his name is not well known among today's fans, Tom Pax's place in history remains secure as the foremost pioneer of pro wrestling's celebrated St. Louis territory. I mean, I know Sam Muchnick gets the nod, and rightfully so, for everything he does moving forward, not just for St. Louis, but for the NWA as a whole. But Tom Pax, man, 25 years, that's a long time to be on top of the world in the pro wrestling game.
It's a long time, and people are taking shots at him all the time, and he went through a lot of social upheaval during the times that he was promoting, and he's remained standing. And without him, obviously, there's no Sam Muchnick, and there's no real St. Louis wrestling, probably.
Well, that's a good call. If there was no Tom Pax, there would have been no Sam Muchnick. The entire world would have been different. So he's a very pivotal character in the world of pro wrestling that doesn't get nearly enough discussion simply because it was pre-TV era. St. Louis market wasn't New York or Chicago or L.A., and, things that were appearing on television moving forward. So it's unfortunate. It really is a sad thing that, a lot of these older promoters are forgotten, and they were the ones that built the bridge, really, to get us to where we would wind up. You know what I mean? And that's what we're going to discuss now as Tom Pax moves out in 1948. And don't worry, I know that document's small. I got it blown up here. We're going to look at it in just a moment. But the Mississippi Valley Sports Club going to take over Tom Pax here in June of 1948. Now, at that point in time, wrestler Lou Thesz owned 55% of the Mississippi Valley Sports Club. So Lou Thesz, the world champion, we'll see many a times over. And we talked about him being groomed by Tom Pax, and here he is taking over for Tom Pax. But we're not allowed to know that Lou Thesz is taking over for Tom Pax, and we'll get to that in just a minute. So Lou owns 55%, Wild Bill Longson another 35%, Toronto promoter Frank Tunney gets 5%, and Montreal promoter Eddie Quinn also an additional 5%. So we got 4 promoters going in, but the majority owned by Lou Thesz, Bill Longson coming in second.
It's a very interesting grouping of folks, isn't it?
Yeah. Everybody wanted a piece.
Yeah, and 80% wrestler owned. Or 90% wrestler owned. Very interesting.
Yes, absolutely. So we got a couple promoters up in Canada who reached out and said, yeah, I'll throw a couple bucks in here, see if we can make this work or not. But Lou Thesz taking the big gamble on himself, and why not? Same thing with Bill Longson. They say, we can make, and you talked about Longson just a moment ago. He's been a big name in this area at this point in time. So it only made sense if he had the money to invest it back into himself. And right now all right, now this, I don't know if you guys can see this. I'll try to zoom in. But this is the actual physical document. And if you look down here at the names involved, you'll see Frank Tunney as a promoter. You'll see Ed Quinn. You'll see Mr. Quinn as a promoter. You will not see Bill Longson anywhere here on this particular piece. And Martin Thesz, who is not Lou. I believe it's his father. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Because back in this era, if you were a promoter, you could not actively wrestle. You were not allowed to be. You couldn't get the license to be a professional wrestler in that particular area. And so we would see that moving forward with Francis Fleischer up in Detroit, and all sorts of different territories would use this little gimmick. And of course, Ron Fuller did it as well. So a lot of people, a lot of promoters that were wrestlers also would use a family member, a wife, a parent, whatever the case may be, to sign the documents as the quote unquote owner of the territory.
Yeah, it's a very interesting. Let's see, we have Martin ends up owning. So Martin owns, according to this document, Lou's and Wild Bill's shares.
Yes, that's what it comes to. Yeah,
yeah.
That's a pretty trusting Bill Longson, right? Him and Lou must have been.
That is exactly what I was going to say. I said, I can understand Lou trusting Martin, but Wild Bill must have had a really good relationship there with both Lou and Martin Thesz in order to trust him with his 35%, because this is a legal document, and there's probably not a legal document that says that Bill owns 35%.
No.
That could be, if Martin decides to screw him over, that could be enforced.
Unless there was some sort of secret, extra, additional document that's in the attorney's office somewhere. That's, 90% for those of you who can't see that up here, belonging to Martin Thesz, which would be the 55% of Lou and the 35% of Bill Longson, because they're not allowed to promote and wrestle at the same time. And without them wrestling, they're not going to draw. And so they're going to, double dip, of course. Another promotion that comes to mind, we've been talking about it, the Chicago Wrestling Club with Vern Gagne and Dick DeBruiser and all their family members that instead were the owners of the Chicago area. And Indianapolis was very similar in that fashion as well. So this happens quite a bit back in the day. Now, for business purposes, you see Lou's father, Martin Thesz, was listed as the promoter on record of all the shows during this era because, well, like I said, we can't have a bunch of wrestlers owning their promotion because this thing might be fixed, and we wouldn't want that to be happening here in pro wrestling.
No, it'd probably be the first time that there would have been a fix for pro wrestling match, and we didn't want that getting out.
Well, obviously they're here. They're taking over Tom Pack, so they are going to be running opposition to the returning Sam Muchnick. He comes back in 45. Eventually, he's back in business. He's here in 48 alongside the Mississippi crew. So Muchnick would initially receive help, though, from the great Carney man himself, Jack Pfeffer. Boy, who'd have thought those two were in bed together? With totally polar opposites as far as I view wrestling business. But Jack Pfeffer coming in to help Sam Muchnick for talent reasons. And then Sam helped start up, of course, the National Wrestling Alliance from there. So the rest, as they say, is history in regards to that. But it's fun to go back and look at this document here and see the guys involved and running against Mr. Muchnick. And Sam has to go find his own alliance now because we've got a bunch of new guys coming into town here running against me. I thought Tom Pax was leaving. Maybe I had I had the next foot up. I was going to take over the territory, but Tom Pax, I guess he sells his shares or whatever the case may be there to Thesz and Company. And so Muchnick goes and finds Jack Pfeffer of all people, the ultimate Carney.
Yeah, but that turned out to be a tremendous relationship for Sam because Jack Pfeffer had again the drawing card, and that was Buddy Rogers.
That's an excellent call. Yes. And so at that point, Thesz was in the midst of a heated war in St. Louis against rival Sam Muchnick. Muchnick, though, in July of 48, helping the wrestling business formed together the National Wrestling Alliance, which would become a cooperative union of bookers looking to better assist each other in rivalries such as the one he was engaged in here. See, this is a polite way of saying monopoly. And
it sounds like when Tony Soprano is describing his organization as a benevolent business association.
Well, we're just going to get together. We're going to try to do things the best we can for the community, for the fans, for the wrestling business as a whole. Just not anybody else who wishes to promote. That's all.
That's right.
So with assistance now coming in for Mr. Muchnick, Al Haft in Ohio is involved. Tony Stecker in Minnesota. I mean, these guys are getting involved. Muchnick was looking to get the upper hand on his enemies here in St. Louis.
Yeah, and as an aside, Al Haft was involved with the John Berger promotion that we had spoke of earlier, and that he was helping supply some of those wrestlers for John Berger as well. Al Haft had been looking to get into St. Louis for quite some time.
Yeah, that Ohio territory was huge back in the day. I don't know what ever happened to it, but man, it was one of the big ones back in there, one of the original territories as well. So Al Haft being involved is a big deal. Tony Stecker, of course, is a big deal. And Sam Muchnick, he's starting to find his own alliance here, a national wrestling alliance, if you will. And this wasn't what you would call a staged war. It wasn't, the NWO versus WCW. So you see so many times in pro wrestling, they would do that later on, these invasions and things like that. But a serious business conflict is what this was. Again, I'm being polite. That would see the winner capitalize on the huge St. Louis wrestling market. There was a great deal of money on the line between the two sides, and neither Muchnick nor Thesz and crew wanted to give up said money. So we had ourselves a serious war here in St. Louis. Who was going to win?
Looking back, it's very easy to see that the Thesz crew could not compete on the. I don't want to make it sound bad, but you couldn't compete on the kind of the intellectual side in the way that Sam could compete. Sam was better at building relationships, better at schmoozing with the people, and better at seeing into the future, having a broader vision. Even though the Thesz group had the talent, it really was kind of a mismatch in many respects.
I feel like Thesz and crew, they were in the wrestling business, and Muchnick was in the business. Like you said, he was more matured as a businessman, and he understood other aspects beyond promoting wrestling events.
And maybe in a way, kind of a more modern comparison is like a Vern Gagne versus Vince McMahon. Not as nasty of a fight, perhaps, but Vern Gagne had the very old way of promoting, and Vince McMahon was a businessman looking into the future.
Well, it was Contos, then it was Pax for 25 years, Sam Muchnick and crew coming in here against Lou Thesz, and unfortunately, all good things must come to an end one way or another. Muchnick and Thesz meeting with each other in 1949, kayfabe, brother, as they figure out a way to fuse together their interests. The St. Louis conflict officially ending in August of 1949, with the two men becoming, we'll call it, even partners here. However, another source has stated that Muchnick held 2 percentage points more than Lou Thesz. So we're coming together. We're not going to announce this to the public, if you will, but at the same time, it looks like it's kind of like, once again, if you can't beat them, join them kind of deal.
It makes sense business-wise for both of them. I think at the time, while they were both factions were drawing okay, they weren't drawing what they would be drawing if there wasn't a war going on. The war was starting to cut into both sides' business.
No, that's a good call. When I looked at some of the figures here, it's a different world, it's a different game, but at the same time, Lou Thesz is clearly feeling like, I can't do this on my own anymore, even with his partners, that he needs Sam Muchnick to be involved. So these guys meet and they come together and they come to an agreement. But now we kind of move into there was no invasion. The wrestlers weren't coming into the other territory or company or whatever. But at the same time, they wanted to create a illusion of competition. So they did not inform anyone that they were all one entity now. They were still two separate entities to the public eye in St. Louis. And to keep that integrity of the two individual promotions, both the Mississippi Valley Sports Club office, which was at the Arcade Building, and Sam Muchnick Wrestling Attractions, which was at, of course, the Claridge Hotel. they remained open separately. So in front of the public and other state officials, even these state officials didn't know there was never a peace agreement between the two during this time period. Frankly, Muchnick and Thesz, they didn't want people to know that there was now a monopoly over the booking and promotions of pro wrestling in the city. Wow, isn't that something like, hey, if we just have one promotion, but we pretend it's two, it can never be a monopoly and nobody else can ever come in here. That's intelligent booking. Management. That's. I know they didn't initially plan for this to happen, but that's a hell of a key.
Yeah, it's very smart. It's when you own your own competition, so to speak, you're going to make money.
And I would love to see the documents on that one and how they worked that one out, since even the state officials had no idea this was going on. Because handshake deals, man, back in this, in the era, really. But I don't know, man.
It is interesting. I doubt that maybe there was a stock issued and actually, in a paper transaction transferred. I don't know, but there were an awful lot of handshake agreements between these in wrestling at this time.
Well, this would go on for
many of which weren't honored.
No, definitely not. And that would go on forever, really, when you think about it. To still think about Watts never getting all his money from Crockett. So there's a lot of
right. And that was even on paper.
Yes, that was indeed. So, well, look at how many people didn't get paid by Paul Heyman as well on the way out the door. So we go behind the scenes. The percentage of ownership of the company eventually going to change here, obviously, with the new agreements. And by December 1955, Lou Thesz sold out his large share, as Bobby Manigoff also owning a piece now by that point in time in 1955. So Thesz giving up his, Muchnick getting much more of the shares here in the office. And moving forward just a little bit further, 1972, Kansas City territory interests were also locked into the St. Louis wrestling scheme as well. So there's a lot of shucking and jiving, moving and grooving here in regards to the business over the next several years. And I'm not jumping ahead. I just kind of want to give everybody a little brief overview of what's happening behind the scenes politically, and just guys selling their shares, taking over parts of the shares. But Sam Muchnick, make no mistake, is the big dog here now.
Yeah, but you correct me if I'm wrong. Frank Tunney still has a part of it, doesn't he?
I believe so. I believe Frank's going to have it here. Yep.
And I think Eddie Quinn still has his portion.
All of them, yeah, all three of the originals. Besides Thesz, Thesz gets rid of his. The other guys continue to move forward. Well, Thesz is pretty big. He's on the move. Remember, Thesz is still pretty much invested in touring the world. Not that he wanted to, if you listen to Lou, but he was still very much in the main event scene around the world for many years to come here throughout the 1940s and into the 1950s. And as for the Mississippi Valley Sports Club, it remained a separate entity until it publicly merged with Muchnick September 1959. That is 10 years of fraud, is what I wrote here in my notes. 10 years they've been working together, but they don't announce it until 1959 that, we've merged. We're joint promotion now. So that's an amazing time to keep a secret here, especially in the world of pro wrestling. But man, when money talks, you know what I mean? My goodness.
No, kayfabe was alive and well back then, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, it was on the business side anyway. I wonder how many people really knew what was going on. I wonder how many of the boys were getting worked at this point in time, jumping from promotion to promotion and things like that. So the St. Louis Wrestling Club was indeed just in time for the TV era of the territory times. They say this in life, but it's so true. Timing is everything. Of course, Muchnick takes over the territory. We have TV at the same time coming to St. Louis, and I guess all is right in the world of Sam Muchnick. So with Thesz dropping out, Longson, Quinn, Tunney, and Bobby Manigoff remain the minority partners by 1959 time. So yes, to answer your question, all three of the originals besides Thesz still own shares. I don't know if Longston still owned 35%, but he did have a share still, and Manigoff came in and he took some of Thesz's shares as well. I always get a kick out of talking about the shares here in these territories, but it's Muchnick who's leading the way now. He's the head promoter, if you will.
Yeah, and I know Bill Longson also was promoting under the auspices of the St. Louis Wrestling Club doing small shows in the city of St. Louis. Like Monday nights after a Kiel show or something, he would have a small show in the Lafayette area of St. Louis. Usually in a place that held maybe 300-400 people.
So we move on, and here it is. There's the man, Sam Muchnick, who begins, obviously he's tried to promote here earlier in the 1940s, but he returns in 1945 and will remain the head promoter of the St. Louis territory all the way through his retirement in 1982. So we talked about Muchnick's time working underneath Tom Pax, his reason for separating from the group in 1941, attempting to run opposition in 1942. It was hard going with the pull Pax had at that time, and Sam wound up joining the Air Force for a couple of years, and that may have been best for him to go away for a little bit and come back re-energized and in a different world, so to speak, as well as far as entertainment goes. So in 1945, upon returning from World War II, Muchnick returning to promote in St. Louis here, he even filed several court injunctions to promote his first show in St. Louis, and December 5th, 1945, he was back in operations. And with the help of Toledo promoter Jack Pfeffer, who sent Sam several wrestlers to help him get started, we talked about that, Muchnick drew, as he got going again here at the end of 1945, 3,771 fans to the arena, while featuring such veteran stars as Ed Strangler Lewis, Roy Dunn, and others. So Muchnick is back. We talked about the Mississippi Valley deal. I wanted to go back a little bit and talk about how Sam got to the point where he was basically merging with Lou Thesz. So it took Sam a few years to get there. But here he comes back December 5th, 1945, promotes his first show back from the war. And by 1949, he and Thesz are coming to an agreement. So it didn't take a whole lot of years for Sam to really grab a grasp of wrestling as a promoter.
No, well, obviously he had learned a lot of tricks from Tom Pax. And like we said previously, Sam had built up a lot of relationships in the city of St. Louis through his time as a newspaper writer and also just with working with Tom Pax. So it was probably pretty easy for him to hit the ground running, so to speak, once he got through the court injunctions.
Right. So the first few years would prove to be tough. Sam was not, it wasn't like boom overnight. It wasn't a big success as Lou Thesz was still headlining the opposition. Remember, Lou wasn't just the promoter. His dad was the promoter, but Lou was wrestling on these cards. So, not only was he getting paid to wrestle, he was getting paid to promote. Lou was doing very well for himself here in the territory. But in late 1948, we talked about it, 2 events took place that turned things around for Sam. As Muchnick recalled, and I quote, "Up to this time in 1948, the only regulations for wrestling and boxing came from the National Wrestling Association, which was mainly made up of wrestlers of the state commission. The idea of forming a new alliance of wrestling promoters actually started with Pinky George and Tony Stecker, who came up with the idea. They decided to back me and send me talent, so they called and wanted to know if I'd like to join their group. We met in Waterloo, Iowa at the President Hotel to talk about the new alliance and declare ourselves a world champion. So the NWA was formed in 1948, the National Wrestling Alliance. Sam was sent all the talent he needed to compete with Thesz and crew, including, as you mentioned, Phil, Nature Boy Buddy Rogers, who was by then outdrawing Lou Thesz on the cards. And of course, the showman Rogers was. In fact, on Sam's February 4th, 1949 card, this may have been the nail in the coffin for Thesz, Muchnick had his first sellout, drawing 10,651 fans there in St. Louis to see Buddy Rogers wrestle the Indian sensation Chief Don Eagle. And Don Eagle was a hell of a name, a hell of a draw in his own right. So to work Buddy Rogers there, Sam getting his first sellout in the early parts of 1949, 10,000 fans out to witness the event, and that might have been it for Thesz. Maybe that's where Thesz says, you know what, maybe we ought to work something out with this boy.
Yeah, he's probably thinking, he's probably seeing that he's on the wrong side, especially with the talent that's starting to roll into St. Louis with all of the relationships that Sam had formed with the other promoters. I mean, Buddy Rogers was probably a pretty much of a game changer in St. Louis because he wrestled a different style than Lou Thesz, that's for sure.
100%. And the showmanship pays off. He was drawing better than Lou by this point. We know Gorgeous George. He's going to have himself some big draws, especially when the TV era comes upon us here any moment now in the world of the United States. So as we wrap up this week, we're going to talk just a little bit more about Muchnick and crew. As we already discussed, by 1949, the two promotions quietly merging, kayfabe. Then on November 27th, 1949, Lou Thesz unifying his NWA, that's National Wrestling Association title, with the National Wrestling Alliance World title after Orville Brown injuring himself in an auto accident prior to their scheduled match. So Thesz became the new NWA Association Alliance, if you will, merging the belts as the association belt was quietly retired. And by 1950, Sam Muchnick was named president of the NWA, which meant his main job was the book out the world champion, thus earning himself an additional 3% of all the gates wherever that champion wrestled. Sam Muchnick, man, it's the tried and true. Just try again. It didn't work. He goes off to war. He comes back and keeps his nose to the grind, and he just keeps going here and forms an alliance with Thesz, and somehow winds up joining the NWA as it begins to grow here. And within a year or so, named the president.
Again, that's a tip of the hat to Sam's connections. They knew who Sam knew, especially the political connections that Sam had, which were going to be very, very, very important.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's just the beginning of the story of Sam Muchnick, how he got started, kind of a right-hand man for Tom Pax while he was promoting. They had a little bit of a fallout there. Sam wasn't happy with the way he was being treated, and he goes and runs his own thing. Doesn't really work out. He goes off for a little bit, comes back, comes right back to it. Said, no, you know what? I'm not done with this wrestling thing. And we're very lucky that that he made that decision when he returned from the war, that he even returned from the war, I should say, really. And so Sam is back, and here we go, guys. We're off to the races. We're going to continue to tell the story now that Sam Muchnick has taken over in the 1950s. They're going to announce the merger with the Mississippi Valley Crew. So Sam Muchnick is the sole promoter in many ways. I mean, some other guys are getting kickback. They're getting paid as shareholders, but Sam is running the show here, not just in St. Louis, but he is now going to become the president of the NWA. He's going to be booking out the world champion. He's going to have a lot of deals to do. He's got to settle a lot of headaches around the world as well.
Yeah, it must have taken quite a toll because you have many very strong personalities fighting with each other, and Sam always had to be the person that solved every problem.
100%. All right, guys. Well, that is going to wrap it up this time around. I had a fun time this week, man, talking all about Tom Pax. Some of the guys trying to run against Tom early on. It looked like, I'm not saying other guys, like you said, 34 different attempts at running against Tom Pax during that 25 years. So I'm sure there were some other guys we left out there, but just looking at the early goings and when Tom was first taking over, it's like, all right, this guy's new. Let's see what we can do running up against him. And nobody was as successful as Pax was. He knew what he was doing as a wrestling promoter, as an entertainment promoter. Unfortunately, something happened there at the end of Pax's run as a wrestling promoter. We don't really know where that $5 million went to, but I guess we may never know. But at the end of the day, it works out. Sam Muchnick comes in, and he takes a while to get there, but he's tried and true, working hard. What an American story here, Sam Muchnick, and he knows the right people. A true American story there. It's not what you know, it's who you know at the end of the day, too. I think Sam had a little of both going on for him, though.
Oh, he in addition to knowing people, he had massive abilities, and that's really the most important thing. You can know a lot of people, but if you're dumb and have no idea how to utilize it, it doesn't do you much good.
No, not at all. So we get to tell the story moving forward to Sam Muchnick here in the St. Louis territory and work our way into the TV era and that epic written agreement on a napkin while on a plane ride. I can't wait to get there in the next episode. Talk a little bit about how TV is born, how the St. Louis Wrestling Club gets moving, and everything in between. And Phil, man, I appreciate you taking some time out of your morning here to join me again and continue to tell this story. I've been waiting to get here, man, and it was a really fun time.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I really had fun doing this. For me, it's so much fun going back and looking at history and seeing what came before us and how it informs us today.
It really is. And I look back and even though, I did the research and I took the notes and I'm reading things that I wrote months ago, I still get a smile on my face when I read some of the silly practices, or maybe not so silly practices that were going on way back when, 100 years ago. Who knew? People think that everything, when we see it today, that it was invented, right? That it was new. And these guys were, a lot of this politicking and everything on else, maybe even more so back then. In order to survive, you had to be very clever. And so in order to succeed, even more clever, perhaps. Yeah,
in fact, that was probably the thing that separated the people who were failures and the people who were successful, is their ability to be sly and clever.
Well, I'm happy we were able to spend 90 minutes talking about an era where you don't hear a lot of discussion on in regards to Tom Pax, in regards to Lou Thesz and crew, and being able to show that document there for anybody here on the Presents. I hope you guys enjoyed just a little piece of history there. I promised future documents. I have a ton of them stored. I'll probably just share them as files as well here in regards to the Patreon, so you guys can zoom in and check it out yourself and have a fun time if you're historians, out there, not just wrestling historians, but just historians in general, and just like to go back and look at old-timey documents, see how things are structured. But I get a kick out of that every time when these wrestlers were. But you caught something I wasn't even paying attention to. When I was looking at the document initially, I go, I can't believe Bill Longson's not even on this document. I didn't realize the percentage until you pointed it out just now, that Martin Thesz 90%, which would have been Longson's percentage. So, instead of Longson must not have trusted his family. He must have trusted Lou more than his own family.
It ended up okay for Bill, so I guess Martin didn't screw him when he had the chance.
Yeah, no, he was in that office for a long time collecting some money. So, I guess, they must have been trustworthy enough to handshake agreement or whatever there was going on the side there. I don't know if there was, like I said, an additional contract or something like that we don't know about, but it was another fun week here on the Regional Rasslin Show. Regional Rasslin Presents. I want to thank the patrons so much here at the VIP tier. They really enjoyed the first episode. We've done a couple other test episodes like this with Jamie Ward and things like that, and we've gotten a lot of good feedback. So I really enjoy being able to just kind of give everybody something to look at while we're talking. But at the same time, in the future, once we get past the slides, I have documents and some old ads and cards and things I want to throw up here. When we get to the actual results, when we start, and we're getting there very close now, probably 2 episodes away, we're going to start scrolling through and looking at the results and talking about the talent. It's going to be a really, really fun time, I think. Yeah,
that should be interesting. The best of the best came through St. Louis, that's for sure.
That's 100% accurate. I will totally back you up on that one. They had no option, right? Sam had the strongholds, everything. But we're going to wrap things up for this week, guys. Another episode of Regional Rasslin Presents in the books. Another episode of Regional Rasslin in the books. Now, anybody listening on the Regional Rasslin podcast, I strongly encourage you guys to give the Patreon a try. Patreon.com/WrestleCopia. We've got 3 big tiers, affordable at any of your costs: the all access tier, the VIP tier, the ultimate tier. We offer very different video casts, and even at the ultimate tier, a Dropbox of footage and things for you guys, old school footage to download. So there's a lot of stuff out there for you guys to sink your teeth into, and you can cancel at any time. You don't need to, it's not a monthly subscription unless you want it to be. But I certainly encourage anybody to go check it out. And hey, at the end of the day, you get to laugh along and have a good time with me and Phil.
Sounds like a great deal. And as a Patreon member, I can vouch for it. There's so much stuff. You can spend days and days trying to get through it.
Well, I hope that's a compliment.
It's definitely a compliment. It's not just stuff; it's good stuff.
Okay, good stuff. Good stuff, even. I like that. All right. Well, on that note, we're going to wrap things up, guys. We'll be doing another one hopefully sooner rather than later. We're not going to make this wait as long next time around. I felt bad. I was just trying to get wrapped up with our ICW show, Steve Crawford. Should already be out or will be out this week if you haven't listened to that one already, guys. And we've got Vandal Drummond coming back in 2 weeks' time to finish up the Los Angeles LaBelle territory story, 1982, the demise of the LaBelle and crew. And that was a fun episode as well. I encourage everybody to check that out. But more regional wrestling right around the corner. Thanks so much for being here, Phil. We appreciate you, man.
Thank you very much, Ray. I had a great time.